Okay, thank you.
So welcome everyone to the weekly webinar for the Escalate Mobile Learning Special Interest Group. And this week we've got quite an interesting group of presenters. It's from a project at the University of Melbourne, from a collaboration with the Melbourne Data group. And I'll let them introduce themselves shortly, but it's a project that Kate Coleman set up and got running, and has invited a whole eclectic group of people into it, including myself. But this morning, I'm really hosting the webinar rather than presenting too much about the group itself. So welcome to the Creative Data Creativities team and their project, and we're really interested to find out about new ways of visualizing data and the implications perhaps for mobile learning. So I'll hand it over to Catherine and the team.
Thank you. And I think, because I just tried my slides and they're not doing much, I might ask Crystal if she can put hers up.
Yep, so I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Right, can everyone see that in presentation mode?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, perfect.
So just before we get started, I'm just going to drop a link to a Google Doc in the chat. Oops, I just sent that to Kate privately. There you go.
Thank you.
Personal message. There we go. That's to everyone now. And just throughout the presentation, if you like, and not, no pressure if you're not comfortable, but if you'd like to just drop some questions and thoughts into this document, because later we're going to be talking about some visualization tools, and we'll use this text as sort of a demo. It's all anonymous. I'll nuke it as soon as we're done. But yeah, just for the purposes of the workshop, if you feel comfortable. Okay, that's it from me. Over to Kate.
Awesome. Well, welcome. I first want to acknowledge that we live and work on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, who are the custodians of this land where we work at the University of Melbourne. Many of us are on different countries and spaces as we meet today, but I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. This is an acknowledgement for our collaboration. In true collaboratory style, we actually function as a collab. So a group of core people who move in and out of the project as they need to and invite others into the collaboratory as needed. So there's people with different types of expertise that bring others from different communities of practice in when we need to, and kind of function in a good tumbleweed method so that we're collecting the expertise, collecting the data and collecting the people as we roll. And I've now turned into a whole new space. Very nice, I'm back. So as a part of our acknowledgement, this is our collaboratory acknowledgement. So on these lands that hold stories across time and space, Data Creativities is a collab of interdisciplinary digital research at the University of Melbourne. We're a cross-faculty University of Melbourne partnership, and we examine what data creative learning looks like in a pandemic and can look like post-pandemic using digital feedback loops. So I have called this session, because I took a bit of control of this first slide, in some of the work that we've been doing, mixtape methods for data in post-digital times of disease. We have a number of contributions that we're making as a collaboratory into the university, and one of those is what do digital methods look like for us post-pandemic, and what are the kinds of methodological shifts that a project like this might actually enable. So next slide, please. So I thought that I would walk you through my mixtape. This is a mixtape of methods, of practices, the implications for M-learning we have been considering over the last couple of days. It's not necessarily been at the forefront of the mixtape. What's been at the beginning of this was how we can actually create a kind of digital methods tool medley, working very closely, which is where my work comes from, with Richard Rogers on digital methods, but how we can actually shift away from some of the more traditional digital research ethnographies that we've seen come from the social sciences, and how HASS digital research might actually shift, particularly when it works inside the creative industries. Arts practitioners have our own philosophy and sociological spaces that we actually refer to, particularly as arts educators. And so within our own digital methods, we actually practice quite differently. And we use that concept of practice possibly differently to other educational researchers, because it's our practice that we're often focused on when we talk about cultures of research. And we've been really interested in disrupting how we understand online cultures, rather than interrogating the culture that we have found in an online space, rather coming to work with it, coming to see through it using different types of tools in our methods, and then see what we actually might generate and co-create as new data to actually understand the types of cultures that we're working in. So this is the mixtape for 2020. And next slide, please. So front cover of my cassette is a Simon Stalenhag. If you have not watched The Loop on Amazon Prime, this is the kind of space that I want to bring you into, where we're actually not focused on technology, not focused in the online, not living in a binary, but thinking in a post-digital environment where, as artists, we've been probably focused on the post-digital work for at least the last decade, having moved beyond the digital into a post-digital space as performers, as visual artists, as exhibitors. If you want to explore museum education, for instance, you know, it's referred to the post-digital for quite some time. So the beginning of my mixtape has a Simon Stalenhag image where these, if you haven't seen this program or seen these paintings before, these kind of remnants of the technology are laying behind, and there's some moments when the humans are actually able to interact, but otherwise they're kind of left behind, discarded, as humanity has begun to think differently about what technology did and might do. So next slide, I'll take you to my A and B. So remember, on both sides of your cassette, you had the kind of A, which was the maybe high rotation, and B, which was where you were starting to be a little bit more disruptive or discursive. So, you know, in our digital methods toolkit, we're thinking about tools a lot. Now, that's one of the problems, I guess, of HASS digital research, which is, you know, tools seem to be the thing that we go to first. So it's at the top of side A. Practices and values and methods are there. We've focused a lot on what our methodologies are and started to come to terms with what a shared understanding of methodological practice might be in this project, what our data sites are and where those data sites are, which obviously drives a collaboration. And the collaboration is made up of the Melbourne Data Analytics Platform and the Social Cultural Informatics Platform, as well as Solange, who comes from FAM, and she'll be able to introduce herself as we move. In our collaboratory, we are a true kind of flat structure. So there's not a sense of an ownership, more a way of thinking about who can bring what at particular times and how we might actually co-construct this thinking, particularly through this critical analysis. We actually frame our weekly meetings around two different ways of thinking within this critical analysis, around a discussion hour where we actually are rethinking our work all the time, and then a very particular co-research, co-lab discussion. We have a focus on platforms, obviously on side A, and the kinds of platforms that we're working within, because we have the partnership with the Faculty of Fine Art, MGSE, and the Centre for Higher Education, as well as partners in learning environments and scholarly services. We're thinking about multiple data sites and multiple platforms within the university, within our collab. And within that, then, multiple types of programs. So side B, which is really the best side, it's the bit that we've actually begun to think about what the product and outcome of such a collaboratory might be, is that instead of thinking about values and methods and methodologies, we've come to think about searching as researching. And how do we actually shift a method, a practice, into this continual exploration, an exploration of what's actually happening in this moment in time, looking at the world as data creatives, not just as artists, not just as a creative industry collaboratory, but rethinking what those things actually might be during a pandemic. We've been very focused on data flows and streams and how we can actually come to understand and see data flows and streams differently, and possibly use different kinds of rhizomic practices to think about what happens when you move one data flow into another space, and what happens to that side and how we might understand it differently. The questions have come after, and this is kind of an order for side B. So how do you search as research, investigate these flows and streams, and then ask questions of those things rather than beginning with a question? We then feed out into feedback loops. And this is where the loop is really important, using a pretty traditional social media or marketing version of a feedback loop in a digital environment, where data is actually produced, visualized, recurated, rethought, and then pushed back into the system to actually be an ongoing iterative process. We've then gone to this idea of how we might actually think about loose parts, and within a playful game-based environment, how we might use loose parts and play to rethink what it is that the project might actually be able to do, not focused on a particular kind of output, but in really listening and seeing what the loose parts actually have to offer to us before we generate whole new ways of thinking. So that's the back of my mixtape. I wanted to interrogate what's on the inside a little bit on the next slide. And then each person in the team will actually be able to take you through their little bits. I wanted to take you into the language of the post-digital, so that lands for you. I know that we all come from different communities of practice and scholarly communities, but in my visual art world, we talk about living and working and practicing within the post-digital era of research. We're very focused on the human experience, but also in thinking about the materiality of the more than human and non-human, which means that each part of the way that we're functioning within the digital method is something that we're responding to in terms of data production. So, you know, for me, the post-digital is concerned with a rapidly changed and changing relationship, particularly with digital technologies and art forms. And this is why our research is particularly focused on what happened in the creative industries when we've actually seen a world that was already living and working in a post-digital. What happened in the crisis was that they were actually able to use the feedback loop mechanisms that they already have built into their communities to function quickly. And even though there was a digital divide for some artists and some mediums within the art form space, other communities were actually able to pick them up very quickly and pull them in. So there was also a rapid response from Creative Victoria in our context, where artists were actually able to apply for quick digital grants to get their presence up online, so that the feedback loops could actually function. Galleries, theatres, music spaces, a range of different kind of musical production spaces, etc., could use hashtags and communities to actually pick up and move those people into digital space quickly. And so because the post-digital research uses data to inform these questions, we've been very interested in using these sites. The second site for us, though, was an education site. We decided that we would look at the University of Melbourne data. And what happens when you have two data sites that seem so disparate, one being post-digital, one possibly, if we wanted to refer to it, as pre-digital, and how could we actually use feedback loops within the two communities to actually make some sense or sense make out of what was actually happening during the time. A great blog post from Helen Carr and Su Min Koo came out yesterday on how we might actually try and understand what has happened in COVID-19, particularly in digital research. And the three lessons that they declared, which I think really fit our research, is that digital methods have yielded flexibility and some creativity in research to rethink what it is that has just happened in a very short time frame. We've also thought in lesson 2 about this digital divide, and it's become more complex, particularly if we look at the kinds of impacts of the digital upon certain communities within the arts and particular practitioners. But that complexity is dealt with when there's a kind of community or collective structure in place. We've probably seen a digital divide differently, within the university, for instance, and our data is indicative of some of these complexities. And lesson 3 is that the pandemic has transformed the ethics of research. We've had to think very differently about the ethics of care in the kinds of data sites that we're exploring, but also in the kinds of questions that you ask of data, if you're asking a question of data rather than asking a question and collecting data. And last slide, and then it's me. But a couple of things in thinking about communities, so creative industries and education data streams. So we're thinking about the kinds of data that the post-digital art world developed, and this was ongoing and rapid. They presented, which we collected, a range of very fast questionnaires and surveys of artists early on, and they kept using feedback loops to actually generate audience sentiment and findings and push them back into the art world, and then ask another survey. So they were actually checking on their communities of practice and using these feedback loops to generate data and co-create solutions for them at the same time. We saw the same thing across the museum sector, where research reports were actually exploring what it is that artists were doing and how they might actually engage with their work. But the middle data stream for us is content, and there has been so much content. There is so much data that's been produced by us and for us that we've had to start to think about what it is that we do with this content, the content that we have out of the university data, but also the art world data. If we just look at the hashtags, if we just looked at the surveys, you know, that we just have lists and lists and lists of data sites for us to start to explore and think about what those feedback loops might do. We also have our team code-generated data. Teams is not brilliant for us to actually be able to use the data that explores from there. But if you look at what it is that as a team of creative industry researchers did, we've actually begun to think about what our Collaboratory has done through data, by the kinds of things that we were collecting, the kinds of things we were producing, and then we were creating our own data through our own art practice and form. And then this huge amount of Canvas LMS data, so that we've got these two communities, multiple streams, and thinking about what it is that we can do within those streams of content. And do I have one more slide? Because I really should stop talking. I just wanted to say this is kind of our messy mixtape that really, you know, got stuck in the player and has been shredded until we start to get our pencil in there and wind this back in. But these feedback loops have become more and more important to us. You know, what does it mean to use the feedback loops that we've seen in the art community possibly impact on education? And how can we take a pre-digital University of Melbourne space with the one-to-infinity into a digital, possibly one-to-one, so that we can use a feedback loop mechanism from the art world, which is in a post-digital one-to-moment? And how do we actually create these knowledge flow and dissemination patterns so that, you know, as Microsoft report, and I'm never a fan of Microsoft reports, but a beautiful quote from something that I've been reading this week around that data is at the heart of a digital transformation, is that, you know, if we're going to use a feedback loop mechanism from a post-digital back into a pre-digital, we actually have something really interesting to show them about what it is about the resilience of the art community, because they were already working in a one-to-moment. They were very concerned with knowledge collectives and how to support those collectives rather than focusing on just a dissemination or content delivery. That's me.
So Emily, shall I stop sharing and would you like to share your screen now? You're on mute, mate.
Always happens. Is this Solange before me?
Sure, yep. Solange, would you like to share your screen or do you want me to drive? And you're also on mute.
Yes, it's the one thing that we've probably done the most during this last few months, isn't it? Kind of talking into a blank screen and wondering why no one is talking. So yes, Crystal, if you can just bump to the next slide. So I put it in the wrong space. There we go.
I think that was me.
So after what Kate has described on our collab, what I've done, I suppose, for a bit of comic relief was to take some of that team's co-generated data and to try and provide a bit of an introduction to our team in a multimedia way. So I'm just going to share with you a 2-minute little mashup of our collaboration. And what the collaboration is drawing from where we are now and where we began. And what we began with was the expression of interest that us as a team, so Kate and myself, had initially met many months ago when the pandemic first began to brainstorm ideas around this collaboration. Well, we'd both come to NDAP with slightly different and yet similar ideas, and we'd been matched together by the fabulous MDAP team, and this is where this collaboration, I suppose, was born. So we wrote our initial introduction to our collaboration back in, when was it? May, perhaps? And I've set the words of that introduction to, I'm going to use a very loose term, music, but what it is actually, it's a summary of our collaboration, which is, I've mentioned, it's mirrored, highlighted, but also disrupted by the Zoom theme, which I've used as an ostinato. And then what I've done is I've used the 34 GIFs that we have so far populated our team site with. And what was really quite interesting is that I see those GIFs as being examples of our mood and our changing mood and shifting mood across these last few months. And sometimes they're excited, sometimes they're full of angst, but they've obviously underscored and highlighted our sentiment throughout this collaboration. And I found that they seem to work pretty well in being able to visually highlight our introduction to our collaboration as well. So I'll let you, I don't know what the best way of sharing it is, Crystal, if it's going to actually work.
Let's give it a go. I've just reshared my screen with sound, so.
Okay, so I won't say enjoy, but you'll be able to have a listen and a look. It's already hidden. It said, that's it, I'm hiding.
It's all good. You should be able to find it.
So I've plopped this into Figshare, and I think, Emily, you're going to be talking about Figshare in a moment.
I was going to say, getting a sneak peek of my section.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm just going to hit play here, and just let me know if the sound goes poor.
Hello, can everyone hear me? We are witnessing a cultural and pedagogical evolution. The current health crisis has triggered an unprecedented societal shift, no more starkly epitomized than within our arts and creative industries and education sectors. These sectors have seen their norms, practices, and pedagogies shift almost overnight, and have had to creatively adapt and modify their practices to ensure survival and the continuation of their activities. Culture is in constant evolution, and it is often the generator or first responder to societal change. In this volatile and deeply uncertain time, creative and performing arts practitioners are shifting their personal and collective practice at an exponential pace, observing, critiquing, and understanding these innovative practices may hold the key to designing pedagogical best practices for the future new normal.
is the Melbourne way.
So I'm expecting an Oscar sometime this year. Just putting it out there.
Or a Grammy even.
But potentially a Grammy as well. I've heard that Dan's Get On The Beers is close to at #1. So yes, might overtake it. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. But yes, so that was a bit of a fun mashup that I actually really enjoyed putting together. But again, I think it speaks in some respects to that sort of creative heart of us wanting to take the data that we are generating ourselves and to see if there are different ways in which we can, I suppose, yeah, there are different ways in which we can view our collaboration and our data. And yeah, that's it. That's it from me.
That was amazing, Salon. That's the first time any of us have seen that video, and I love it. I'm going to tweet it so much. And the best part is that you'll get alt metrics for it. You want to take control of the screen? Yeah.
I will in just a sec. I'll just may as well leave that slide up there before I go on to the other thing while I just give some general introductory notes. So basically, yes, as you can see, going to talk a bit about Figshare and Amica. So basically, you know, as we've been talking about, we're generating all this data and all these different visualizations and all these things, and we want to be able to both have somewhere to keep it and somewhere to share it. So I'm talking about a couple of tools available for the storage and sharing of data, which is also really useful for non-traditional research outputs, things that you want to be able to share and have people cite, but don't fit neatly into like a journal or the like. So starting off with Figshare. So just for anyone who's unaware, so Figshare, it's an open access repository service. It's been around since 2011, and I think generally available since about 2013, and it lets researchers store their data and importantly share their data with others. So you can store your non-traditional research outputs, including figures, data sets, videos, software, compositions, reports, all sorts of things, as well as traditional research outputs in a safe and secure manner. Now, you can just use it as a repository, as a place to keep all your things together, which we are doing, as you'll see in a sec. Because yeah, as you said, you know, things like teams and so forth, we're all gathering as a collaboration, we're all gathering all these different things, but need somewhere to collect it all together. But the really major thing with Figshare is that it can mint DOI, so digital object identifiers, for your data that you store there. So it's a place where, as we just did with Solange's video, you can share your research output and have all the relevant metadata. So Melbourne University has its own institutional instance of Figshare, which is what we've been using, but you don't need to have this. You can just sign up for a Figshare account. So rather than talking about these various services, I'm actually just going to show you. So I'm show you the process of adding one of our research outputs to Figshare. In this case, looking at a figure that Crystal has created for the Data Creativities collaboration, which I think she's going to talk about in a sec as well. So I'm just going to do the quick screen sharing thing and Google Chrome, that's what we want. So, and getting all my bits and pieces. Go away. That's what I want. Okay, so this is Figshare. So this is the various bits of things that we've added so far. So far we haven't added a whole lot, but we're in the process thereof. And so, you know, you sign in, you can also just have your own data selection, but there's also projects where groups of people can come together, which is what we're using. We've got this Data Creativities project. And so what I'm going to do is add this this figure. So by just going on the Add New Content button and creating a new item. And there we go. So first thing we can do is upload the figure itself, which I downloaded last night. So it should be this one. fingers crossed. And so you're just going through, then have to add the relevant metadata. So for example, this is called the interaction system, and I am cheating. I pre-typed up the thing so you don't have to watch me awkwardly type. This wasn't created by me, it was created by Crystal. So I'm going to have her name as the author. And you can add multiple authors. So if you've worked on something with multiple people, you can have everyone acknowledge as the author. And then you have to select a category, which is all actually field of research codes. So we're going with creative arts, media, right. Click it, that's it. So that's added that category. Item type, in this case, it's a figure, but as you can see, you've got all these various different things that you can item types, and you can be flexible in that as well. Put in some keywords. In this case, this figure relates to these particular keywords, and then a description of the object. So that's, you know, what you would expect a description of the thing to be. We've also included, we want our work to be cited as the data creative, hashtag data creatives. That is something that doesn't entirely work well with Figshare, along with many other things. So we've just added a note to the bottom of descriptions. If something's created from particular funding, you can put that in. If it's related to any other resources, in this instance, it's coming from the work, the document that we're creating about this particular project, with the tools and the methods and the methodology, and also the how-to. But that currently doesn't have a DOI or a link, so I'm not going to put anything in there. But with Figshare, you can go in and amend and change as well, so that's fine as well. For everything, you add in a license. So we're going with the, you know, there's all the various license types. Just goes default to Creative Commons by 4.0. And this is the important bit. So, so you can reserve a digital object identifier. So that means that we're creating that DOI. So when we publish it, it'll be created. And then quick, and it's the usual when you're doing something live. I'm missing a field.
For the keywords, you need to do one by one, and
yeah, I was worried that that was going to be the problem. Yeah, just write them in. Methods.
And then you just enter or return.
Yeah,
that's it.
Thank you. Data, and platforms. It's not a live demo if you don't do something wrong. And right. I will go in and add that resource in later when it's ready to be added. Yay. So then, and yeah, as you can see, it's pretty nice when you haven't done something, it'll tell you. And then you click publish item, you get your various warnings to make sure, yes, you definitely want this to go, and hit publish, and then that is ready. So you can go to that item, and you've given created a DOI, so you can share this, it can be cited, it's created there, and there's it all looking visual and ready to go. So that's, you know, obviously this is great. This is a really important way to have things stored and together. But what if you had a collection or several collections of items that you want to be able to share together, like we do, in their own space? Another option for sharing your work is through platforms such as Omeka. Now, Omeka is another open source tool. We're very big on the open source. And so it's specifically designed for online collections and exhibitions, and it's free to use, it's open source, and it's kind of geared towards the GLAM sector, but it's available for anyone to use. There are a few different versions of Omeka, including Omeka Classic and Omeka S, which is intended more if you're hosting your own, hosting it yourself or by institution. So And we're using Amika and Figshare together. For example, videos that have been shared on Figshare, we can then use the copy the source code so that it goes and displays in Amika as well. So to give you an idea, I'll have a quick look. So this is our Amika page, and it just looks like a regular web page. So essentially we've got our thing, and then you can go and look at the various items that we've added already. So whether it's tweets, it's reports, it's all these sorts of things. And again, gonna just quickly add this particular figure onto Amika. So basically the back end looks like this. It's always this kind of brown color. It's not the most attractive one, but that doesn't matter because you can pick your own theme for how it appears online. And then you just have your adding your items. There's all sorts of item types that come with the default, and you can create your own as well. And that's something you can kind of poke around with, and you'll be able to see a bit when we go there. But if we're going, this is our list of items. So that's all the things that you just saw over there. And we're just adding an item. Starts off in terms of capturing the metadata, and that's one of the really valuable things about Amika and why it's good for exhibitions, is because it is inherently about capturing metadata. So, and goes with Dublin Core. So again, if we're going with this particular resource that we've added onto Figshare, so we grab our title from here. Ooh. Our subject for this, we've chosen to just go with the field of research codes that we've added there. Description, so copying. So a lot of this we're copying straight from Figshare. Ooh. Ooh. Creator. So in this instance, we can have data creativity. This is the creator, the source. So this has come from the data creatives. Ooh, I'm making my notes. Publisher, so it's Melbourne Uni Figshare is how it's been published. Date, recording the date that it was published. Contributor, so this was created by Crystal, so making sure her name is on there. Rights, it's Creative Commons, again, that's from thing. File format, this is a PNG file, so putting that in there. Ooh, clicking there. Language, it's in English. Ooh. Type, it's a figure. And identifier, so go back over to Figshare and get the toy, which is, where did it go?
I think if you click on site, you'll be able
to... that's right. Yes, thank you. Copy toy. I practiced this last night, but you can't tell. And coverage, that doesn't apply to this because that's talking about if it's a thing. And then we've just got some item specific questions. So this is a visualization, which was one that we've added. So put that toy in again. Some notes, and I've just written some notes about this. And visualization will have this attached as a file. And then we can just go to files, and I'm just going to attach it here again. And then, forgot to, that's all right. Let's go back into it. Let's make it, edit, make it public, save changes. And now when we go to our website, it's there on our website. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. So that was a very quick and dirty run through, but essentially just showing how it's actually super easy to add. If you choose to use Amika, or if you choose to use Figshare, it's super easy to add your data on there. There are fancier things that you can do in terms of like getting the source code from the from Figshare and putting that in the Amika. It can connect to GitLab, GitHub. It's got various things like that. But it's a really good way to have your stuff up and online and in a way that is shareable and citable, and as Crystal mentioned briefly before, altmetrics, and yeah, and it's a way to make your stuff available and also store it in a secure way as well. So, and if you're working in an area with non-traditional research outputs, it's really good for when you're having to put in your reports to the university, in terms of when you're adding your publications. It's much easier if you can just give your publications officer the digital object identifier. That makes life so much easier. And for that, I'm going to hand over to Crystal.
Thanks, Emily. That was excellent. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. All right, so I'll just give a quick overview of what I'm going to say, but then I think we'll try and open it up, make it as interactive as possible. Okay, so this is the figure you just saw Emily put into Figshare, and this is a figure I've been working on for another project, and I think it's an interesting way to think about what we're doing in this project. And you know, we have a very iterative approach in the collaboration. So is this the final form? Probably not. But I think it's probably a nice way to frame what I'm about to say to you. So the idea behind this figure and this framework is that our digitally mediated interactions leave behind data traces. So like little or big footprints of data about where we've been and what we've done. So this framework is about two things, but the thing that I want to speak to you about is about how this framework is a way of trying to work out how our goals feed forward into the digital mediums that we're engaging with. So at the heart of this framework, this framework is for understanding the association between goals and the mediums through which these goals are realized. So, you know, yes, we're online. Yes, we're interfacing with our devices more than ever, but we're still human. So, I mean, you know, we're still striving to achieve similar goals, you know, from conversing to sharing to learning to teaching. It's just the mediums through which these goals are realized that have changed. But it's the goal on which everything else in our ecosystem, in our digital ecosystem, is predicated. So the flow of our interactions are all derived from our goals. So whether we want to have immediate feedback, as in live chat, like we've been doing in Zoom chat today, or delayed feedback, as in a forum post, or sort of a responsive artwork, that all depends on what the goal of our interaction is. And similarly, whether we want to communicate via voice, so or video, so this is why we're Zooming today, right? Or via image or via text, that's all dependent on our goal. So this flow of interaction determines the medium or the platform on which our interactions are realized. And it also determines where our data traces can be found. And I think that's the important thing for our collaboration. So as we go through the next few slides, really the main takeaway from this is that for us, being an online collaboration is not about the tools we use, and it's not about the tech, and sometimes it's not even about the digital, it's about the human. So I'll just give a quick example, and then I think we'll throw to the demo. Okay, so one example of this is our Teams data. So our goal was to collaborate, and that collaboration was really non-directional. So we knew we wanted to discuss and we wanted to share and we wanted to converse. But sometimes we also wanted to put information out there and give each other the opportunity to think on that information and then respond when we had a considered response ready. So we could have used email, and we could have used Zoom chat, but because we wanted to engage at these different tempos, we needed some sort of medium that allowed us to interface in different ways depending on what we required at any one time. Yes, good. So sorry, just trying to follow my notes so I don't go over time. So it was for that reason really that we settled on Teams. But also it's important to note we didn't have to choose Teams. We could have used, you know, Slack or Yammer or something. But we used Teams because it was supported by the university, because it was private, and because it was also pretty widely used within our faculties already as well. So that was the reason for choosing the medium. But then there's all this stuff that comes after that. You know, there's this data trace. So from teams, you can extract certain kinds of data with varying degrees of difficulty. But early on, we identified that the value of the value of looking at our data from teams about how we engage with the platform and how we engage with each other. So we started looking at this digital footprint, and we started making this data human friendly again through visualizations, which is down the bottom left here. But this data and these visualizations, they weren't the goal. The goal was to collaborate. And it just so happens that this collaboration left data traces in this digital ecosystem. So we reclaimed that data from the ecosystem, and then we used it to feed back into our own interactions, to loop back and to inform our own goals and how we were achieving them. So I'm going to skip this slide, and I'm going to move to the next one. So this is a little example that I thought we could do together. So the goal here is for you to, well, to tell me what you think. That's kind of what we were writing in the Google Doc. And, you know, we could have used the Zoom chat, we could have used email, but none of those things really gave exactly the flow we wanted. So, you know, we used a Google Doc. So as a result of that, the data we have is all text form. But remember, the data wasn't the goal. The goal was for us to find out what each other was thinking. And so now we're going to visualize that data. We're going to make it, we're going to humanize it again through this online tool called Voyant. So I don't know if anyone has used Voyant before. Maybe you could use your raise hand function in the chat if you've used it before. But it's this great little online platform that really takes away the technical hurdle that sometimes you have to overcome to engage in some things, you know, in some sorts of visualizations. So this is the link here. You can Google it and play along if you want. I'm going to paste some text from our Zoom chat, even though I just went on about how we weren't going to use Zoom chat, but just because it'll just give us a bit more text to feed in. And I'm going to paste the text from our Google Doc, and then I'm going to hit reveal. So the neat thing is that this link is sort of semi-persistent. It can die, but I can share that with you right now. And in fact, I am going to. Just have to open my chat. Sorry, just a second. There it is. And you can jump on and you should be able to look at this same visualization that I'm looking at right now. So automatically, the first thing that jumps out to me is that we share a lot of links. That's kind of cool. We're using our interaction here today to actually share a lot of information. You know, there's references to sound, cool, some references to data, that's to be expected. So this word cloud is kind of a really interesting way to see what some of the high level, to do like a distant reading, to see what some of the high level themes are. But then another really fun thing that you can do, and we're just looking at the default options here, is you can have a look at this visualization, which shows you when words are appearing over time. So, you know, I think it's interesting that, oh, we have a spike here in sound, and that's when we were playing the visualization. What's this spike about? Oh, that spike's about sound. What's this spike about? Okay. Yeah, so a few spikes about sound. Cool, and this is, we were sharing a lot of links at the start of our chat. We seem to have been sharing some more at the end of our chat. So this is just a fun way that you can take the data from your interactions and loop it back into what you're doing. So I'm going to stop talking now. I'm going to stop sharing screen, and I'm going to introduce Amanda, who's just joined the call. Hey, Amanda, who's also part of the team. And I guess I'm just going to open the floor.
And if I can just chuck in there, one of the things I liked about, you know, Crystal, when you bring us through that, is sometimes this visualization for us was a cause for reflection and discussion. So it's technology mediated reflection, which was really good at particular points in terms of helping us move forward, particularly when we stalled.
Hey, well, thank you, Data Creativity's team. It's been a really interesting overview. So any questions for the team? So there is another element of the project we sort of mentioned very briefly about altmetrics, which we've kind of run out of time to explore. But there's a workshop that the team will be running coming up, and it's going to be several hours. So we'll be able to go into a whole lot more depth into each of these elements, including the altmetrics side of stuff. Kate, do you want to throw into the chat a link to the workshop details? I'm not sure if that's been made publicly announced yet, actually.
Yeah, we don't have the front-facing stuff online yet.
Maybe just the date.
Yeah, so 14th of December. That's right, isn't it? 14th of December, that's a Monday, in the afternoon.
Yeah, and so it will continue to do these ongoing feedback loops, you know, so in social media, feedback loop is continuously shifting the message and using that kind of cultural message space. And rather than kind of, you know, just exploring the message, really intervening within that message and thinking about how we can use that feedback loop to continue to not just shift our project in terms of its methods, but to shift how it is that we might support what comes in a digital or post-digital learning space, as for those of us in educational research, but also as in a teaching research nexus.
I was interested in Voyant.
Yep.
Is that a free tool? I've got a student who's analysing chat from US sociological online lectures, and I'm just, they're a computer science student, so they were going to sort of do it in a more programmish way. I'm just wondering if this might be something they could use.
It is open access.
The only thing that I would just say is if they've got ethics, so they have ethical considerations, this server I think is in the States. Yep. So depending on where their ethics says their data can be stored, but yeah, otherwise it's open access.
And there's another tool that we use sometimes, otter.ai, and if you give it audio or video, it'll create the transcript for you. And sometimes that can be helpful because you also have the times, so then you can know where to jump into the audio or the video for particular, you know, snippets out of the transcript of the chat.
Yeah, okay, but thanks for that. I think they've got to that point. They're actually using the video system used by gamers. For some reason, this American professor was using that, which is curious. So we've extracted the time codes and things, but it was more some sort of simple analysis. Yeah. Thank you. That was intriguing.
That's good.
So I guess one of the things I'm particularly interested in was the link between these non-traditional forms of output and the link back into traditional, metrics, and that's where that link of altmetrics and also, DOIs, etc., from Figshare and all that sort of feedback loop there really interests me. But as I said, we've kind of run out of time to explore that today, but that will be part of our workshop. So just another plug for our workshop coming up on the 14th of December. And we'll get the details out and share it with the SIG as well. So if you want to find out more about this.
Continue conversation digitally. I think that, you know, for that frames more data for us to actually think about how those feedback loops work. So we use hashtag data creativities or data creatives, as you've seen. They seem to be the kind of feedback loop for into our own creative practice. So the more you can use that. Yeah,
so Twitter's another source of data that we've been exploring. And as Kate says, we've been using the hash data creativities. And Crystal actually created a Twitter bot to sort of, I guess, increase the amount of data. So anytime that hashtag is used in a tweet, it gets retweeted by Crystal's data bot.
I see Chris has left a question here, but he's had to leave. Can the server be stored in Australia? So there is an Australian server. I don't know if it's back up. It went down for a bit. But I guess my advice about Voyant servers, whether it's wherever it is, just be very mindful of the ethics around the study you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the issue with the data we were exploring through Canvas was the ethical ethics around that. And so basically that has to be kept private at this stage. Hey, well, thank you, team. So it was great. Our first run through of doing a bit of presentation about what we've been up to. So it's a bit of a trial run for several presentation sessions that will be coming up over the next couple of months. So fantastic. Great to see it all come together.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Thank you.
To everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll make this available on YouTube and I'll send everyone the link once it's up.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks. Bye.
Everyone, thanks for having us.
Yeah. See ya.